mage in the house with the sick flow. Now listening to Evil Dojo. Dark Mage in the house with the sick flow. You are now listening to Evil Dojo. Dark Mage in the house with the sick flow.
For you everywhere, so cold you can't even feel my stare. Why try? I can do the shit anyway. So cash in hand, we ain't got no time to play. Oh no, no, I can't do this alone. Oh no, no, I need that evil dojo. Oh no, no, where the fuck are you, Dark Mage? Oh yes, baby, I need that evil dojo. Hey you, I've been looking for you everywhere. So cold, you can't even feel my stare. Why try? I can do the shit anyway. So cash in hand, we ain't got no time to play. Oh no, no, I can't do this alone. Oh no, no, I need that evil dojo. Oh no, no, where the fuck are you, Dark Mage? Oh yes, baby, I need that evil dojo. Oh no, no. Oh no, no. Oh, oh.
All right, I think we got that intro down. I just need like a cool animation sequence or some shit. Greetings, Earthlings, planet dwellers. It is I, Dark Mage, and I have returned to the old codebase. I have a lot to say about this topic. I'm going to try and do my best to simultaneously rant while I write things. Not so great at that. as I've explained before. However, we will do it to the best of our ability today, as we do every day. Why am I going back to the old code base? I had some fun exploring a couple different projects beyond the main game recently. One of them was building a very generic entity component system, one that could be very easily extended with super minimal code. And it generally worked, but I did run into a small problem. And it was a problem I did not anticipate, and one that will require some very careful thinking in order to overcome. The second project that I began playing around with was using Raylib in the Rust language. And that experiment showed some great promise. I think that there's a viability for me using Rust for a game developer project in the future. Not necessarily right now, because at the end of the day, I do have a lot of work here already. And I don't want to have to rewrite everything all the time. I am known to do that quite a lot. Would like to start growing beyond where I'm currently at, because at the end of the day, for the original code base, I already have a good workflow for adding new components, implementing and testing out new features, etc., etc. And generally speaking, the games that I'm going to be making going forward are going to kind of conform to a general flavor of the kind of code that you see here. So in other words, we're able to break things down into their logical components, and we don't need a fucking GUI IDE to do this shit either. We're able to do it entirely inside the terminal and end up with a reasonably good graphical representation of what our game is, right? It's kind of been my dream since being a kid to make a game this way. Here we are, we're doing it. And we have a million ways to do it this way too. We are not strictly limited to one way of doing things. Apologize if I'm stretching. Oh, that felt good. I realized recently in booting up the old game code, I'm missing a help menu. It's kind of something I want, because I forget why I remapped camera control from C to B. But to turn camera mode on and off, or at least camera movement, it's B. And then just like with Dwarf Fortress, to zoom in and out, is back and forward bracket, right? What did we have working? Attacking, movement, clearly, box pushing. Pick up and equip item. We had the custom attack animations working for axe, knife, sword, but not whip yet. Pardon. We are not printing real item name information in the message output. I think I had just gotten to the point where I was trying to decide, like, really whether or not, like, I was really thinking about, like, how to manage inventory, right? So, there's going to be a number of different ways that I can go about doing this. But I think I've decided that when the user pulls up the inventory, we're probably going to want some sort of grid so that navigating it and managing items is easy. Because going through a list sucks. Let's all be real. So we need some sort of like bare minimum grid. Like we need to think about like the in-game representation of the inventory, as well as like the user interface to that inventory. And we want to try and make things like as close to one so that there's as little translation step from like one space to the other as possible. As a warm-up, I wanted to get the help menu rolling before you do any like other big heavy lifting type stuff. I think we opted for no mouse. I'm just gonna wipe this file out. Help my immediate thoughts are help menu. With attack animation. Um, We could have some sort of matrix type data structure to manage the inventory, like I don't plan on having like items of different sizes, like in like Path of Exile or Diablo or one of those type games. I'm gonna be fair. I'm not gonna force anything that crazy. Each cell in the grid will represent one item. However, there is a possibility that I choose to implement weight. So while you might have space for so many items in your inventory, and you might end up like using them all, and they might all be super lightweight, and you're like, why don't I have more inventory space? Maybe it's because like there's a reasonable limit, and there might be ways around it, like with bags of holding and stuff like this. But it's gonna be more like Monster Hunter in this regard. There's no like weight limit, but there is like a limit of number of items that you can carry. It's like anything you find from the field in that game gets sent to your like your box, so that like when you get back to camp, it's all in your box. Excuse me. So at some point we would need like chests, or yeah, like treasure chests and things like this, where if you examine an item on the ground that is, because wouldn't it be crazy if you could like pick up a treasure chest? I mean, reasonably you should be able to pick up a bag or small box maybe, but like no small boxes. You could push small box as we're currently doing. Okay, so as a warm up, we're gonna actually have 8 or vibe code out the help menu, just because it's like really easy, and there's already like text, like we already have like help, or we already have like message boxes and stuff working. So Spacebar for attack would actually be kind of good. Um, because then you can almost like one hand it. At some point, we're gonna get like really configurable controls, but in figuring out like the initial, for me, best experience, we're still kind of in that process. So it's not WASD so much as QWEADZXC. QWEADZXC. Left hand side. We could always like limit it to like arrow keys, but ew. Oh, I don't like that. I also kind of want it to be like a bit more dynamic. So we're gonna pull in vector for this one. So instead of using a constant char array, So and it would probably, like once we figure out like the real format, statically allocate this stuff ahead of time, and then that way, it'll be like optimized and won't be like constantly reconstructing itself every fucking frame. BDDA. Yeah, I just haven't like thought through like how I would implement such a system. But I'm also like kind of thinking that system's not as fun. It's one extra thing I have to think about, and it's one extra thing the player also has to think about. When we could be taking that unit of energy and putting it somewhere else. Hmm. Oh, all right. Let's see how that looks. Oh wait, we don't have a button to actually pull it up yet. Gameplay scene. Almost there. So I actually thought some of the controls for like attacking, like attack is actually kind of fine with apostrophe, but I kind of want pick up item to move from semicolon to forward slash. But then we need a like a help menu button, right? So the no, not inventory. Um, right, so game state is awful looking, nasty bitch, nasty bitch. But she does all the work, so I can't hate too often. Plus, I made her, so she's my creation. She's my nasty bitch. So we got display help menu, right? Very simple, very straightforward. So in liblogic, we will set display help menu to not display help menu. So that way you kind of have to press it. Yeah, this is the same way I had it coded previously. Oh, actually, that's a good way to do it. Let's reuse this. Handle input help menu. Yeah, let's reuse this. Shout outs to new follower. What's up on that platform? How you doing? Con. Nice. How's it going, Con? We're implementing help menu as well as a handful of other things right now. Previously did some experiments with a couple other projects, decided to come back to the old code base. Here we are. A little bit of probably get some pizza, and later on make some sandos. May or may not run some laundry while I do all this, but I also got a pen test going on in another terminal, and I have to keep an eye on it every so often. Some hacking going on over here. But while I'm doing that, I'm also working on this, because this is ultimately, at the end of the day, the really big thing that I want to work on. I wish more people wanted to pay me for. So, not to mention, this is also the project that I've got furthest along. So it's really the one that I want to work on. So draw help menu, right? Handle input. Wait, no. Wait. Draw frame. If display help menu, draw help menu. So in handle input help menu, right here. Oh, right, we gotta change this. We don't have an any pressed? Yeah, we do. Oh, it's gotta be a const input state pointer. Huh. Wait, what? Oh, we never updated this one. Okay. Good. I'm glad we found this. So this is going to be a const std shared pointer to an input state like that. Okay, so now that works. Okay, we could actually just make them shared pointers. And I have to have the const. Okay, good, good. We need to actually call it, right? So down here during handle input gameplay control mode player, we that's a long function name. If G display help menu is currently active, then handle input help menu. Oh, it's ISD. One of those one functions that I ended up making backwards. And just for like good organization's sake, one thing we can do is flip those parameters. Now we can actually maintain the same order as we had for here. And that's just kind of cleaner. It's a really subtle detail. Ultimately doesn't matter too much in the long run. But when possible, like if you have a lot of functions that kind of like use the same data structures and have the same inputs, you should keep the order the same. It's kind of like a good idea. Oh, well, dude, it's already got like there's so many files in the project already. Are you kidding me? Like you want to talk about separate files? Not like I'm not doing that already. But at the end of the day, like libdraw and liblogic are the two like beasts of this whole like project. And yeah, I was talking about like possibly breaking some of them up earlier, but like it would be still like just sub modules or sub files that would still belong to like libdraw and liblogic. And you know, like we could even go through the whole process of like fragmenting the entire project in such a way as like every single function has its own file if we really wanted to. And that might make some very interesting observations about like build time as well as like jumping around and trying to find things. Because I did actually go through a process where I marked pretty much everything that was like exclusively being used by lib like draw, for instance, with static void, because it's like intended that these functions are not really meant to be called from outside of this function or this like outside of this file, right? Like but as an example, and we might go through something like this, but first I have to get help menu working. So, and actually maybe help menu would be like one of the first things that we do. So let's get back to, let's do a fresh build. All right, that's a reasonable help menu. Okay. So it's not really press escape to close so much as press any key. Not to mention the we don't we could use a separate control node so that it's not like because I'm actually pressing a directional key to like close the menu. So he's like moving at the same time as that. So that's kind of interesting. Um, hey, you can't knock me because the whole project is at the moment under 10,000 lines of code. I'm doing pretty good. Like I am making an effort to like keep things trimmed. Plus, it's C. It's C++. You like there's a little bit more work that you have to do for each individual action. All right, we got the help menu basics in. Good start. Good start. What's next? The problem, Dulce, with I mean, one of the major issues with actually creating what you describe as more accurate simulation is that for each of the various items that might exist, I would have to come up with an appropriate, not only grid sizing, such that the size of the item fits exactly into a specific number of cells, but also having to do this for every single item and then testing to see that makes sense for each item. It almost like I'd have to make an entirely separate ass project just to properly do that. And so that's its own rabbit hole. And because that's one thing that would make it take infinitely more long for me to actually get something out there, this is my approach. So whether or not it is or is not more accurate from a simulation perspective, there is a balance between accurate simulation and fun. This is one of the things that Tim Kaine talks about in a couple of his videos. He actually has a whole ass video on inventory list versus inventory grid. Because the discussion on list versus grid is one thing, but the discussion on, I guess the word you would use is volume, like how much space in the grid-based inventory does a particular item take up? Because not only do you have the logical component of that whole thing, but then you also have to properly handle the sizing of the sprite in order to fit into those cells. And I feel like this is a reasonable balance for me between not having the annoyance of like, oh yeah, sure, implementing list inventory for me is very easy and just straightforward. But like if you've ever played Skyrim, you know how fucking annoying managing a list-based inventory actually is. And so to make it easier for the player to manage things, I'm doing this. We'll start off with like a 4x4 or 3x3 or something super small and scale it up from there and try to make something a little bit more dynamic. But how we actually go about implementing that, we might actually need to make a class. And what would be in this class? And further, how big should each thing be, right? So if the player has an inventory, what is an inventory? An inventory is a glob of items, however you choose to represent that glob, whether it's a list or a matrix or even a cube. So it needs to be m by n or something, right? Something reasonable. Something potentially resizable. So like, you know how like in Minecraft, I think you start off with like, or is it Minecraft or some other game where you start off with like so much inventory? No, it's Stardew Valley. That's right. Stardew Valley, you eventually get bag upgrades that give you more inventory space. And actually, I like Stardew Valley as a great example of this type of management system that I'm trying to build here. So we might start off with like a small list of things, right? So we would want to like statically like we need these slots to be empty to start with. So matrices just seems very straightforward, but we need something like a vector of vectors. And I want to make like something that's a wrapper around this. But ultimately, at the end of the day, an inventory is basically going to be the same kind of construct as like any other container. You know, given any container, you specify an n by n. And you end up with a vector of vectors. So actually, no. No, we want we're gonna call it something like item container. Well, what is an item container? If the item container itself, I don't think we need to have it for the outer one so much as the inner one. So this is shared pointer of vectors. Oh, no. Shared, yeah. Shared pointer of vector of entity ID. So it's a vector of vectors, each slot containing an entity ID. You have your default constructor, which we would actually probably want to pass our m and n to represent we might actually have to make this outer one also a shared pointer. Or maybe no. All right, so the grid starts off empty, right? So first off, grid equals make. Oh yeah, no, we got to make shared of vector to a shared pointer of a vector. Wait. Oh no, there's only one make shared. Make shared vector. Wait. No. Grid, we don't do that. For grid, we create a shared pointer to a vector of entity ID. And then we grid dot pushback. And then we do that m times and we have our grid. But then for each of those, I'm gonna need some more coffee in a minute. We push back entity ID invalid. Now, because we're actually reserving the space, we can actually directly access each location in the vector and just directly assign it like this. Similarly, you can do the same thing for the outer grid. And instead of pushing back here, we would do grid bracket I equals row. So this would initialize our starting container, no matter what size it would be, whether it's a 1x1, a 2x1, a 5x5, a 10x10, 100x100, whatever. So what's the default behavior when we go to pick up our first item? I'm going to keep a memory of what the rows and the columns are. So enable the chat. All right, y'all ain't saying anything right now. Maybe we're going to keep track of like a next insertion location. Or better yet, maybe we just want to like search for the first available slot every time that we do something, right? So like we want to write an add function, takes an entity ID. Remember, grid of I is a pointer. So to access it, we're going to have to dereference it, right? So that is grid of ij. And if grid of ij is exactly equal to entity ID invalid, then that equals ID. And return true. Otherwise, return false. It seems like it makes sense. Okay. Okay. Although I'm going to be this explicit and start like updating these rules at some point to kind of conform to this, because setting it up like this, if I make any changes to the .h file, it'll rebuild the whole object. Same thing with the .cpp, of course. But because these are two things and I'm not like passing, I don't want to pass .h to the build rule, I'm going to explicitly specify this like this. And then eventually, like, it'll be set up in a way to like more easily automate building whenever any change is made. I got a cat and a dog sleeping behind me. Doggo's gonna have to wake up here in a bit too. That'll be a good time for a break, as well as get some food, get some more coffee. I don't know how long I've been on already, but a little bit over an hour. Okay, so far so good. But we have no way to access the item container yet that we just created. So like, all these maps, right? Each one of these represents a different component. And if we wanted to have an inventory, and I do, definitely do, is at the moment we're only managing an equipped weapon. So like shared pointer of an unordered map to an entity ID and a item container. Eventually we'll update how we're handling equipping and picking up items and stuff using this. Oh yeah. There's first add inventory, which would actually create a empty brand new inventory. Check to see if an entity has an inventory. Um, Actually, not going to be item container. Going to be shared pointer item container. Because this way management of the actual inventory itself could be handled by whatever it is that's actually requesting it. And we don't actually have to like set the inventory, because once it's like created, once we grab a pointer to it, we can just like update it, because literally all we're doing is like storing the location of it. Sound about right? Okay, so it's implying we haven't really created the inventory list yet, which is fine. We can do that real quick. Okay. So now we have the component inventory list. Um, we might actually, instead of wanting to like remove, or rather return bool, return the actual entity ID. Um, when managing the inventory too, you might also end up wanting to remove it by like an XY position. Now, over in component.h, we've got an inventory component. Um, okay. So when we go to create the player, um, all we have to do is call add inventory. So later, when the player goes to pick up an item, At the moment, when we go to pick up an item, we're actually like equipping it, but we're going to modify this so that instead of picking it up or and equipping it immediately, it will instead get sent to your inventory. Now we have no display for our inventory at the moment. So one of the next steps we could do is get the basic grid drawing as well as like the inventory display logic. Because once we actually have like an association between like the entity ID that's in your inventory and like what actually is supposed to get drawn on the screen, be very straightforward. Where are we at? Let's do a check-in. Uh-oh. Burp, burp. Oh, whoops. What line is that? Oh yeah, so just do a 5x5 or maybe like a 2x5. I don't know. Maybe 2 or 3x5 would be a good start. So far, so good. Everything feels good there. Not many people's really watching. That's totally fine. Usually people end up coming later. Sometimes people like more directed, constructed content. All right, let's see here. Getting nothing on this one, huh? Yeah, we're still using this old hash table structure. I'm eventually going to get rid of that and use STL stuff. A lot here that we're not going to use. Yeah, there's a lot of commented stuff out there. That's fine. At the end of the day, we just need to get like the basic window displaying again before we actually get the grid in there. And then I'll still have like that cool like tooltip type display where it shows like info about like each item in your inventory as you have them selected. So if display inventory, draw inventory. So similar to the help menu over in liblogic, and super bare minimum like this. So actually, Oh, my baby just woke up. This might be a good time for us to take a break then. All right, y'all. Until next time, if anyone's still watching, take it easy.